Welcome back to the show where we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. After we run you through the Dolphins news you need to know about, we get into the fan Q&A where we answer fans' questions. It's an exciting episode today, ladies and gentlemen. The draft is nearing, and this might as well be the Super Bowl. This is the closest thing we've had to a home playoff game in Miami in a very long time. I mean, this is a big deal for this franchise, and we have a lot of news stories relating to that. We don't have a big topic today. Most of the stuff that I really want to discuss is revolving around a lot of these news stories, so we're going to get into a little bit of a deep dive into that. So let's get into the news you need to know about. If you hear dogs in the background, I apologize. There's nothing really I can do about that. So let's start with cap space. People are wondering, and this comes from Pro Football Rumors, this first news story, and it's how much cap space the Dolphins have and how it relates to the rest of the league, and how high do they rank and some of the savings that they still have left. So if you don't know, Barry Jackson and Omar Kelly do a show, basically kind of like this show, except there's a video of them. It's kind of like First Take. If you don't know it, it's the X's and Omar show. I'm sure most of you have watched it. But I always watch it because you always learn some interesting stuff about the organization. And one of the things that they said was that the Dolphins are waiting for the draft to end to sign free agents, to see if they, maybe they didn't address something in the draft that they wanted to, and they can address that in free agency. So this is actually a very important news story, very underrated news story, because I do think the Dolphins will sign more players after the draft, especially after the X's and Omar show, where they kind of not hinted at it, they literally talked about it. So this is where the Dolphins rank in terms of cap space with the rest of the league. They are 5th in the NFL right now in remaining cap space with $23 million. The Colts, Eagles, Lions, and Browns are the only teams ahead of them. So they still can make some moves. Maybe they can't get someone like a Clowney, which would be crazy, but they definitely can, although they probably could work something out with Clowney if it's like a one-year deal. Let's not get into that whole situation right now. But, I would expect them to really, I don't know what they would really address. Maybe the free agent, or not the free agent. You could see maybe a Logan Ryan come off the board. Something in the secondary. If I had to guess what the Dolphins would do, I would think it would be corner. If you're asking me, like, what do you think the Dolphins? I think maybe someone like a Logan Ryan, or just some type of a defensive back would be something that they would target for sure. So in terms of free agent, positional targets, what to look for after the draft, definitely defensive back, I think is something that the Dolphins might do, because there's some talented guys left on the board that could definitely help the team out, even though the team doesn't need it. I really do like the setup that they have now with Nick and Needham in the slot, Byron and X on the outside. Depth is a little bit of an issue. Maybe, you got Colbert, who's coming off the bench. You still got Jamal Wiltz, I believe, coming off the bench. I think I heard something that he was let go, but I'm pretty sure we still have Jamal, or I have to say his name, who played well in spurts last year. So there is sneaky depth in the secondary. There's a couple guys that I still kind of like. But I think you could definitely see the Dolphins adding some more defensive backs to the roster after the draft. So, yeah, just to repeat myself here, the Dolphins currently rank 5th in the league in free agent cap space left. So they're currently ranked 5th, which is still pretty high. They have $23.9 million left in cap space, and that ranks 5th in the league. It's pretty good. This next news story also comes from Pro Football Rumors. Dolphins favoring Herbert over Tua. Connected to the 2020 quarterback class for over a year, the Dolphins may have a major decision to make in round 1. They may have to choose between Tua Tagovailoa and Justin Herbert at the 5th overall spot, or prepared to trade up for one of them. Less than 2 weeks away from the draft, Herbert may be pulling ahead at this juncture. 90% of the pre-draft intel on the Dolphins' quarterback hierarchy points to them going with Herbert over Tua. Matt Miller of Bleacher Report reports. We've also heard reports from Peter Jackson, who said that the Dolphins, nobody knows what the Dolphins are doing, and likely this is a smokescreen. So again, when you talk about contradictions, I don't think there are so many contradictions. Nobody knows what's going on. Let's just put it down. It's pretty clear that there is one of the three is a major smokescreen. And we still don't know. And that's something we talked about in last week's episode, but that's not what we're talking about here today. I want to talk about the Dolphins and what decisions they will make and what is there a terrible outcome to this? I don't think there is. When you look at the decision between Tua and Herbert, when you look at the top 3 guys of this draft, Joe Burrow, Tua, and Herbert. Now, if the Dolphins go off the reservation or like, you know what, we really like Jordan Love, we like, he's a project, we'll sit him for a year, and hopefully he's developed by the time that happens. I don't like that scenario. I'm not in the Jordan Love camp. I'm just not. I know that you can get him for cheap in the draft and you talk about capital, even though people constantly overpay and overdraft quarterbacks in this league all the time. So who knows what Jordan Love's stock really is. But we're not talking about Jordan Love. We're talking about the top 3 guys in this draft. When you talk about Herbert, Tua, and Burrow, I think the Dolphins have to get one of those 3. And if they do, I don't think there's a bad outcome. And again, this is related to the story that do you go Herbert over Tua? Whatever the Dolphins do between those 3, I don't think they're going to be... I love the coaching staff. I love the organization. I think it's better than... It's the best since Dan Marino was drafted in the first round with the Dolphins. Like that, this is the best situation a quarterback has gone to in terms of a Dolphins organization since Dan Marino. And I don't know if you think it's close. I think when you take into account the roster renovations the Dolphins have done, the amount of draft picks that they have, the decisions that they've already made, the improvement that we saw from last year's team that was an abysmal roster, and that team should have gotten, you can make a strong argument, should have gotten 7 wins out of that roster, which is insane. All of those things are pointing in the right direction. So I take that into account when I say there is no bad outcome to this. I really do believe that. If the Dolphins pick one of the 3, Herbert, Tua, or Burrow, I think fans can sleep well at night. And I mean that with all the confidence in the world. With all these Herbert rumors swirling, I really wanted to watch a lot of Herbert, and that's the only quarterback that I haven't watched a lot of. I've watched a lot of Tua. Literally every snap Tua has ever taken in Alabama. And Joe Burrow, I've watched a ton of him. And I wanted to watch Herbert, who I've been up and down on. I've been wrong. At one point I said Jalen Hurts was a better prospect than Justin Herbert. That is not true. Justin Herbert is a way better quarterback than Jalen Hurts. I was severely wrong on that. When you look at Justin Herbert, one of the things that when I watched him that I took away from this, and I don't want to keep this long because we got other news we got to talk about. I don't want to drag. But it really has turned me around on him. I actually like him. I think he's a really good quarterback prospect for sure. He's obviously a big quarterback, sneaky athletic, really kind of turned the naysayers down in the Wisconsin game, where he made a lot of plays with his legs, a lot of plays off script, which kind of is my biggest criticism with him. Out of everything that I watched, here's the things that surprised me about Justin Herbert. Number 1, he doesn't make bad decisions with the football. Even though at Oregon, he played on a terrible, and when I say terrible offense, if you guys take the time to go watch Justin Herbert play, his offense was really terrible. That narrative going around in the media is true. It is a one-read offense. They throw so many screens. There's basically no running game, okay? Their running game is their screen game. And they're actually a pretty good screen team, and they should be with the amount of times that they call screens. I mean, it is insane. Like, it is insane. The offense is very simple. It's a one-read offense. There's not a lot going on. There's not a lot of misdirection. It's a pretty simple offense. It's not a good offense. And despite that, Herbert doesn't force balls, and his turnovers are pretty good. He doesn't make bad decisions with the football, which really surprised me. Because usually when you see Josh Allen and some of the other quarterbacks that have come out of the draft in the past, well, their scheme was bad. The people around them were bad. Now, Herbert had a good offensive line. He had a better supporting cast than Josh Allen did. Let's just put it that way. He did. I'm not saying that but it's not that much better. It's not that much better than Daniel Jones was. It's not that much better than Josh Allen's was. And despite all of that, he still makes plays and he doesn't turn the ball over, which is a big, big up for me. He doesn't make bad decisions with the football. I think that's not talked about enough with him, that he just, despite all of those issues, he still doesn't make bad decisions with the football. He still makes good decisions. The second thing I want to talk about is his accuracy. He's actually pretty consistent when it comes to accuracy, and he's actually surprisingly accurate. You think he's a big arm quarterback who just slings the rock around, not necessarily accurate. When people say he has all of the, what's the analogy? The clubs in the bag, whatever golf analogy you want to use, where he can pass with touch, he can give you the fastball, he has every throw in the book, is true. There was a throw against Auburn. I think it was on a third down. By the way, Justin Herbert, if you are wondering about Justin Herbert, go watch his game versus Auburn, okay? He played really well in that game. He played against a team that was better than the team he had, and he should have won that game if it wasn't for some crazy stuff that happened at the end. But there was a throw he made on 3rd and 8, I think it was, in the red zone to keep the drive alive, where he threw someone open. He was bodied, and when I say bodied, I mean bodied. The guy was not open. And he throws a perfect pass. He throws him open, low and to the left, and I was like, dang, that was a Tom Brady throw on 3rd and 8. And I'm not even joking. I was like, that throw was underratedly amazing. And the fact that he has all of those attributes, not to mention the fact that he's 6'6", not to mention the fact that he runs in the, he's a really good athlete. He's a 4'6", 4'7" guy. And he doesn't make bad decisions with the football. He has all of the throws that you need. And he played in a bad scheme. And despite that, he didn't turn the ball over. And you hear that all the time with bad quarterbacks. It's like, oh, their scheme sucked. They're Jay Cutler was the most, he never had a good coach. All that stuff. Well, his coaching wasn't good. And the guy still, shined, even despite all of that. And put up really good numbers. And led his Oregon Ducks team to a Rose Bowl victory over Wisconsin, and that's pretty I don't think that people are talking about that enough. That's actually special. So, and again, when it's relating to, where do you go? Tua over Herbert. There's not a Trubisky in this draft. There is if the Dolphins go off the reservation, obviously, but I think it is between those top 3 guys, and whoever they pick, you can sleep well at night knowing that all 3 of these guys have a really good chance of being a franchise quarterback. And Herbert, even though I was down on him, I'm completely come back, and watching him play and watching almost every game that he played at Oregon and every snap that he took, I came away really surprised. Now, there is one downside to Herbert that I don't like. People bring up the fact, well, Joe Burrow and Tua have great supporting casts, and they did. They had way better receivers than anything that Justin Herbert had, and that's not even a debate. But Herbert's offensive line was actually pretty good. It was not a bad offensive line. If you look at the game against Auburn, who had one of the best defenses in the SEC, their offensive line played really well in that game, for the most part. The thing that I don't like when I watch him play is he gets good protection, a good amount of the time. Like I just said, he has a good offensive line. And this is the only thing that I don't like about his game. He gets rid of the ball way too quick. He's too athletic, he's too big, he's too strong. He gives up on the play way too quick. He needs to utilize that more. And we saw a little bit more of that in the Wisconsin game. But there's times where he'll go through all of his reads. Oh, there's no one open. There's no one around him, and he'll just throw the ball away. And it's like, why doesn't he have that in him? Like, oh, it's 3rd down. Let me make something happen. I have all the physical gifts in the world. I can throw 70 yards down the field on my knees, for God's sakes. Let me make something happen. And you just don't see that with him. And it's frustrating. It's like, what the heck is going on? Like, great protection, throws the ball away. Now, if he was a pocket passer, if this was Josh Rosen, if this was Tom Brady, if this was Peyton Manning coming out of college, I'd be like, that's a great attribute to have. But this dude's 6'6" and can run like a deer and can throw a mile, and you just don't see that enough from him. And he has those, and people rave about it. It's like, oh, this dude can throw 70 yards from his knees. He can run, for a 40-yard touchdown, which he can do. And he just doesn't do it that often. And it's really weird. And let's move on, because I didn't want to turn this into my opinion on Justin Herbert story, because I want to keep this related to the story. Herbert, I think, again, like I said, if he was a pocket passer, this wouldn't be a problem. It's not a bad attribute to have. I'll say that. Is it frustrating at times? Yes. Did he do it in the Wisconsin game? Yes. Did he even do it in the Auburn game? Yes. He actually did do it against great competition. You just don't see it consistently enough, and it is frustrating. And I don't think it's gonna affect his game on the next level, because when he's in the pocket, and if there's someone open, he not only does he read it, because he does, in my opinion, see the field pretty good. I don't think I've ever seen him, oh, there was somebody wide open and he missed him. Never ever saw that. the fact that he doesn't turn the ball over in a bad offense and a bad scheme, he makes good reads with the football. He's sneakily accurate with the football, by the way. Those are all good attributes. But again, the bad thing about him is you just wish you would have seen it, a little bit more. Just use your tools, man. He acts like he's Peyton Manning sometimes, where he just, there's no one open. Let me not make a bad decision. Let me throw the ball away, and there's no one around him, and you're like, what are you doing? And that's the only thing I don't like about his game. Other than that, he's a really good prospect. I loved watching him. I was super surprised. Like I said, if I had to recommend 2 games for people to watch, it would be the Auburn game and the Wisconsin game. The Auburn game is my favorite of his because, he makes that throw early in the game where he does scramble around and it's an Aaron Rodgers-like play. He had 2 really that's an NFL. That is a special player right there in that game. He had 2 plays like that where he kind of ran around and then he found someone in the back of the end, at the right corner of the end zone for a touchdown. And again, this is against really good competition. And then later in the game, I think it was a 3rd down, going into the red zone where it was just a perfect pass. And if I had to recommend any 2 games, you guys should go watch those 2, the Wisconsin and Auburn game. I think Auburn's his best game. He played really well in that game, scored a lot of points against a good defense when his offense clearly was inferior to the defense that he was playing in terms of talent level. And I just really came away really wondering, if the Dolphins actually do pick Herbert, is it that big of a deal? I don't think it is. To couple that with the great organization, the culture has changed. It's going in the right direction. You take a prospect like him and some of the stuff that he can do, some of the stuff that he does really well, and you mold your organization around someone like that. I think it could, nothing but good things can happen. And I'm totally, whatever the Dolphins want to do, I'm like, well, I see why they did that. And I'm going to be pretty psyched about it because I like all 3 of those guys. I think all 3 of those guys have a good chance of being a franchise guy. And again, Herbert's probably the most talented when you think about physical attributes than the other 2. So I think the Dolphins are in a really good place right now. And this whole news story that we just discussed about, do the Dolphins like Tua over Herbert? I don't think it's a big deal. It's like picking, here's both of your favorite candy. Pick one. It's like, I think I'll have the brownie today. It's like it doesn't matter. You're not getting a Jamarcus Russell. You're not getting a Mitchell Trubisky. You're not picking Trubisky when there's Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes in this draft. I think whoever they pick out of the 3, they're going to be pretty happy with, and I'm super excited about it. All right, hopefully I didn't want to turn that into a rant. I try to keep that on topic as much as possible. Hopefully I did a good job of that. So let's move on to the next news story. This comes from the Miami Herald. And this comes from Barry Jackson, the Miami Herald. Miami Dolphins showing love to several running backs in this draft, determined to land 1 or 2. When Ohio State running back J.K. Dobbins left Dolphins headquarters after spending several hours with Coach Brian Flores and General Manager Chris Greer on March 12th, he emerged believing the Dolphins really like him. Meanwhile, a Dolphins official has been telling people how much the team really likes Georgia running back DeAndre Swift. And then it just goes on to a bunch of speculation. So, again, the report there, the meat of it is what I just talked about. The Dolphins, spent several hours with J.K. Dobbins, Coach Flores, B-Flo, and Chris spent a lot of time with him. And apparently, according to a team official, they really like DeAndre Swift. So, I really wanted to talk about this because this is important. Okay, so let's just put it this way. Let's say the Dolphins get their quarterback and their 2 tackles. This is my dream scenario. And they get a running back in the 2nd round. That would be, I think my head would explode. And to be honest with you guys, that's actually a possibility, which is crazy. They have themselves set up pretty well. Let's just put it that way. But when you look at the running backs in this draft, I love my 2, and you guys, I've said this since the beginning. And I have not changed, unlike with the quarterbacks. I have not changed my stance on this. J.K. Dobbins and Jonathan Taylor are my favorite running backs in this draft. I love both of them, especially J.K. Dobbins. I love both of them a lot. Great production at high-level schools, high-level competition, and they were running by guys that are going to be in the NFL. Both of those guys are going to be good players. But when you look at the roster and what the Dolphins have now, what do they need at running back? This is what they need at running back. They need a receiving back. They need someone who's a great change of pace guy, who meshes well with Jordan Howard, who's more of a power, wear you out type of a running back. And when you look at J.K.'s game, and you look especially Jonathan Taylor's game, I mean, Jonathan Taylor is a spitting image of that. That's his game. And he's got a lot of speed to him, too. And J.K.'s game, those two aren't necessarily the best, and they're not the best receiving backs in this draft. So I think if the Dolphins were really going to nail this position, I think they have to get someone who is, again, just a different style of runner to Jordan Howard. And that's what made the New England offense so potent, is they had a lot, and obviously you guys know, I mean, with them being in the division, James White and Sony Michel are two different players, and they use them completely different in their offense. And depending on what down the distance it is going to be who's in the ball game. So the Dolphins need their James White. They don't have that right now. They have their Sony Michel and Jordan Howard, who's their bell cow. They need someone who's a good change of pace guy, and that's really what I looked at when I looked at this. So when you look at the two guys who are best at that in the draft, it's Clyde. I always get his Elaire. I get his full name messed up all the time. I know people get upset when I get the names messed up, but he's obviously a great player. And then you look at DeAndre Swift. Those are two of the best receiving backs in this draft. And I think those are the two the Dolphins should. Let me see if I can name this. Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think that's how you say his name. If people get upset about it, don't know what else to tell you. I promise you I've watched a lot of him. So out of those two, who's my favorite? It's got to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because here's the reason why. I think his best games are way better than DeAndre Swift's games. His best games. When you look at the Alabama game, people always bring up Joe Burrow, and rightfully so. But Clyde, they leaned on him to close that game out. And if you don't know, Clyde's 5'8", okay? And he looked like Larry Zonk out there. He was carrying the pile. He was getting first downs in the passing game and in the running game, and he closed the team out not by himself. Obviously, he's got an offensive line in front of him, but he closed that team out. They leaned on him to close the Crimson Tide out, and he did that. And I think that was his best game of the year. And that really, to me, puts him over Swift, where I don't really, in such a big game like that, and with a ton of NFL talent, I don't think Swift ever took over a game against that type of competition the way Clyde did. And to me, when I look at these two, I think Clyde is going to be the more durable player. Just the punishment he took in that Alabama game, and he never lost any juice in his legs. He just kept coming. And again, this guy's 5'8". Okay, he's a small back. And he just kept coming and kept coming and kept coming. So I think he's going to be more durable. He's a little Darren Sproulsy, Clyde's game is. His short area quickness, his ability to catch balls out of the backfield is really the best in the draft, probably. He can't cut like Swift. He doesn't have those oh my God, I don't know how, this dude's ankles are left on the... He has that to his game. It might not be on Swift's level, because that's what everybody raves about when they talk about Swift, but Clyde, in my opinion, is the better change of pace, James White type of a guy than Swift is. And so I would go with Clyde if I was the Dolphins. Just watching them both, and like I said, I think the Alabama game is what really stands out to me as, okay, this guy's going to be really good, and I think he would be a great compliment to Jordan Howard. Plus, I know he's going to be there in the second round, and he might fall to the third or late second, really late in the second round, because I don't see any of the running backs going in the first. If they do, it's probably going to be Swift. I think Dobbins and Taylor have a strong chance of falling out of the first round, and then I think Clyde is probably behind them. I don't know how Scout or GM see these guys, though, and I think it's very different from what the media thinks, with Swift being number one. I don't know how you can watch all these backs, and no disrespect to Swift, but, I mean, JK, if you're looking for a bell cow back, JK and Jonathan Taylor are by far the best in this draft, in my opinion. If you're looking for someone like Marshall Faulk, Roger Craig, Tony Nathan type of a guy who is going to get 1,000 all-purpose yards every year, then go with your Clyde. Maybe he doesn't take, we're not Derrick Henrying this, and he's taking 20-plus carries a game, and he's going to win you a game. That's not Clyde. Clyde affects the game in a lot of different... He's more of a Kamara McCaffrey type, and to me, I think that's what this team needs. So we just read this article that, okay, the Dolphins maybe want one or two of these guys. I think Clyde should be number one on the board. He's just as talented as the other guys, and he might not give you, again, the bell cow factor in terms, like I said, he's not someone you just pound, but He can, be effective in a lot of different formations. He's a third down type of a back. He's a mismatch nightmare. And he's something that the Dolphins team doesn't have. And he can act as a pseudo slot receiver in terms of production. He can give us those 500 yards and those first down conversions on 3rd and 5 and 6 that we weren't getting last year from inconsistent slot play. So I like that aspect of his game, and I think he's I think he's the best prospect for the Dolphins to pick at running back, in my opinion, because of all of those things. So I would be really excited to see that, because I think he fits well in Gailey's offense, and I just think he's something that the roster needs more than the other two, and I think his style just brings something that we need. All right, this last news story comes from Bleacher Report. Okay, so this comes from Bleacher Report. The title is Joe Burrow Rumors. Latest on Joe Burrow. There has been some buzz coming out of Paul Brown Stadium that Joe Burrow might not be the consistent top pick among the staff in Cincinnati. While the LSU quarterback has sat atop draft board since late November, Peter King of NBC Sports recently noted that not everyone in Cincinnati is sold on Joe Burrow. So Peter King, I think I called Peter King Peter Jackson earlier in the podcast. I apologize. I might have done that. Definitely not someone who directs movies, but so this is an interesting news story. Here's the thing and I've said this and I've told you guys this for months now. I have a feeling that they're going to pick Herbert. I don't know why, but I've said this since the dawn of time, since the beginning, that I really do believe, and the fact that Peter King is reporting this, obviously longtime NFL reporter, I don't know, man. There's something about that I really do feel like. If the Bengals pick Herbert, Dolphins fans will be seen from space just descending to the heavens. Like, this could not be a better day. They didn't have to give up the farm to get him. The Bengals took care of that themselves by just picking him at number 1. Like, that's awesome if they do that. Like, that's a dream. That's a dream scenario for the Dolphins. And if that does happen, that would be everybody would just lose their mind. So I don't know. I've always had a feeling that, and if you look at it from the Bengals' perspective, what do they gain from? Let's say this news was leaked, and they're trying to, let's set a smokescreen. We're the Cincinnati Bengals. What the heck is the smokescreen? That you guys like Herbert, and you would just pick him at number 1? Why would you want that ever to be out in any other NFL team? Why would you ever want that to be a smokescreen? Because you would just be like, yeah, we really like Burrow. We want to trade down, but we'll trade down. You don't want to tip your hand like, yeah, we like Herbert more. Then team will be like, all right, we'll figure it out then. If you like Herbert more, then pick him at number 1. Because we'll just wait for Joe Burrow. Like, that does, unless it's just a straight up lie, but I don't think it is. Because why would Peter King's not lying. He obviously, unless someone lied to him. So it just makes it for an interesting story. Like, the Bengals, and again, the Bengals were at the Senior Bowl. I think they had the most coaches there. And Herbert won the MVP. He was the best player there at the Senior Bowl. So those two factors, maybe the Dolphins do get Burrow, and maybe the Bengals do pick him. And let's be honest, we've seen crazier things happen. Like, I remember when the Deshaun Watson draft and the Patrick Mahomes draft, no one saw the Bears getting Mitchell Trubisky. You know what I'm saying? So who knows what NFL franchises are thinking? Who knows what NFL teams are thinking? Nobody even saw at the time the Chiefs trading up to get Mahomes. I mean, that was crazy at the time. So I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. And it's just weird. It's like, what a weird story coming from such a highly regarded source like Peter King, that the Bengals like Herbert that much where they would take him with the number 1 overall pick. I think there is some truth to that, and I think it's going to play out. I think everybody's going to have holding their breath on draft day. It's going to be really interesting, guys. I mean, this is, like I said, this is the closest thing we've had to a home playoff game in years. So, all right, let's get into the fan Q&A. I think we have 22 questions today, which is pretty good. And I would like to thank everybody for the support on the recent videos. We've broken our record for most likes on hold on, that's me. I accidentally played a video in the background, but we broke records, early channel records this channel's records for most likes on a video. The last 3 videos, we got over 100, and that's a record. especially for 3 videos in a row, I believe, which is pretty crazy. That's definitely a record for this channel, and thank you guys for that. That it means a lot, and hopefully you continue to support. And let's get into the fan Q&A, where we answer fans' questions. I think we pretty much covered the news. We spent half an hour on news, so that's pretty crazy. This first question comes from MC. He says, do you think the lack of being able to interview and work out players physically and directly will affect Miami's draft pick decisions? I think it does affect GMs. I'm not a GM, never have been, never been on a scout. I don't know the intricacies of being them and how much that actually matters to someone of that profession. You know, because my entire sports, I mean, we all just sit there and watch them. Like, yeah, that guy's good, that guy's not. I mean, that's kind of what it comes down to with us. We don't actually, go to pro days, for God's sakes, and, talk to their families and stuff like that. So I would say it has to, but I don't know. I'm not a scout, so I really can't answer this question. When you look at NFL history, and I'm going to be very quick, I don't want to bore you guys on this. A good example of this is when Phillip Rivers climbed the draft boards, and I think that was the 2004 draft. And literally the only reason he did is because of the Senior Bowl. And when teams went to go watch him and interview him, they fell in love with him, and he shot up the draft board, and for a lot of teams. So that's I guess a great example of someone, getting picked way higher than they otherwise would have if people couldn't physically go visit him. So I think it does when you look at the history of the league. Like Jerry Rice is another good example of that. You just kind of find gyms probably better. But I feel like if you're a GM in this league, you should be able to do a good enough job or a stellar job with just watching film. If you can't do that, then you're not a good GM. I think people are like, oh, will this affect... Dude, listen, you didn't have to come within, hugging distance of a guy to know if they're a good football player or not. So I think in my personal opinion, I think it's overrated, and I think it's because we have nothing else to talk about. But I don't know for sure, and there have been examples of teams picking someone higher than they otherwise would have just because they met him. So this question comes from Beef. He says, the NFL draft is less than 2 weeks away. The excitement is building up. At the same time, I'm very nervous. The Dolphins staff has done a very good job this past season and this offseason. Who we get first overall could determine the future of the Dolphins. How much do you trust in this staff that they will make the wise moves in this draft? I trust them a lot. With the talent at the top and the amount of ammunition they have, with the guys they have in their front office that have had a lot of success in the past, it makes you feel real good. And it makes you feel good because of what we saw in the past. Plus, to be honest with you, if we had to rank GM-coach relationships in the NFL, I don't think there's a closer one than Chris Greer or Brian Flores. I mean, they go everywhere together. They really seem to genuinely like each other, and they definitely are on the same page. Both of them came from New England. Have New England ties, so they're very similar, and it seems that they get along a lot, and that's a really good sign for the Dolphins. Because to be honest with you, more times than not, the GM and coach don't get along, and obviously that ends very badly for franchises. So for all of those reasons, the stuff that we saw last season, the staff that Brian assembled, the people he got to come to Miami, it really shows you what kind of guy he is and what other people think about him in the league. We got Caldwell down here. We got McKenzie down here. He got Chan Gailey to come out of retirement. He got O'Shea down here. I mean, a lot of really talented coaches he got to come down here. And you see that with all the hires from our staff. We were a 5-11 team, and we were getting picked like we won the Super Bowl, for God's sake. That shows you enough, and I think for all of those reasons, I'm confident in the Dolphins to nail this. This next question comes from SM. SM says, Xavier Howard and other number... okay, let me redo that. I'm sorry, guys. This question comes from SM. SM says, Xavier Howard are number 5 overall to move up to number 3 for Tua. What is your answer? I'm hanging the phone up. I'm not giving you a shutdown first-team All-Pro caliber guy who can lead the league in interceptions at corner. I would rather just give up a first-round pick. I'm building something with this secondary. I'm not tearing it down. We have something special going on. I have to keep Byron and X together. I just can't separate that. I will give up picks, but I'm not giving up because X. Not because Tua is not good, but because it's just too good of a thing to break up. I got to see those two play together. Xavier Howard is a really good player. I don't think people understand how good he is. I think the best example of that is against the Steelers when he left and when he was in there. Juju couldn't move, and then when he left, obviously things were different. So yeah, I just can't break those two up. So I had to hang the phone up on that one. This next question comes from SM. He says, "What are your thoughts on thoughts of teaming Preston Williams up with his former teammate from Colorado?" I haven't seen enough of this guy, so I can't give you a good I can't give you a good answer on that one. That's him. This next question comes from Ethan. Ethan says, "Hey Skaggs, who would be a cannot pass player?" I think that's what you meant to say. Player at pick number 18. I think when you look at, I'm a really big fan of Espinoza or AJ Espinoza. I don't know. I can't remember his last name right now. The defensive end from Iowa. I've been a big fan of his since we started talking about this draft on this show. I think he's a top 3 defensive lineman in this draft easily. I would love him at 18. You guys know I love Andrew Thomas if he's still out there at 18. Ruggs, it would be a great pick. McKinney out of Alabama, the safety Xavier McKinney, would be a great pick. Those are I guess that would be my draft board at 18. Like AJ, Andrew Thomas, McKinney. I think I'm forgetting someone that I just named. But yeah, those guys I really like, and I think there's a possibility they could be there at 18. To answer your question, Ethan. The next question comes from Richard. He says, "How about the Dolphins drafting LSU running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the 3rd round? Excellent receiver and route runner, and is strong enough to push the pile. He scored 16 touchdowns for LSU." Yeah, I think he's the best pick for the Dolphins and what their roster looks like right now. Like I said, they don't have their James White, and they need that. And Clyde is literally made for that. And he would be a great pick for them. I think either if they go with JK, then that's totally fine. He's not the receiver back Clyde is, but he's a great running back. He's going to be a great running back. I love his game, and I love Jonathan Taylor's game too. I think either way, you're getting a talented guy. Now, Swift is, if I had to rank Swift with the other 3, I think he's probably 4. I like those 3 better, in my opinion. And I've said that since the beginning. Like, Jonathan and JK have always been my favorites. And Clyde, I just think, fits the scheme, or fits what the Dolphins need. And he's not only a need guy, but he's also just a really talented player, too. This next question comes from Beef. He says, "If Tua were available in the draft, but the Dolphins decide to go with a different quarterback or a different player, do you think the Dolphins knew a red flag about Tua, or do you think it will be an unwise decision on the Dolphins' part?" If they go Herbert, I get it. I'm like, yeah, he's pretty talented too, and he doesn't have the injury history. I would understand. He's worthy of the 5th pick. He's talented enough to go there. I really do believe that. He's not a waste of a pick, and I do believe you have to pick him at 5 because he will go to someone right after that for sure. I like Herbert a lot. I think he's going to be a good player, and I've completely changed my mind on him, man. Like, I was watching him play, and I'm like, you know what? I'm wrong about him. If this was any other year, and let's just say you put him on the Dolphins, and I just had to watch him, I'm like, yeah, this guy's pretty good. Like, he's a 1st-round quarterback. He's a top 10 quarterback for sure. In terms of he deserves to go in the top 10 of the draft, and I like him a lot. So if they decide to go Herbert, I'm good on that. If they go with let's say they go with Isaiah Simmons or Derek Brown, or they go with the tackle and Wills, I think is how his name. I know I was calling him Willis last episode. Whatever they decide, if they do that, then I'm going to be a little upset, yeah, because they need a top-tier quarterback. They can't. Jordan Love is not. He's a project, and anytime you go project, I'm like, no, because I watch these other guys and I'm like, yeah, I get it. These guys are good players. I don't need to be like, oh, we're projecting what Love can be. I know what Herbert is. I know what Tua is. I know what Burrow is. They're good quarterbacks that do things that they do very well, and I think that will translate to the NFL. I'm taking those three. One of those three. I'm not taking Jordan Love. And yes, I have watched Jordan Love. I like the other three better. So yeah, I would love if they went if they have to go quarterback, but if they don't go Tua, that's fine. It has to be Herbert though, because you can't not take one of those three in my opinion. The sixth question comes from SM. He says 2 offensive tackles, a running back, and Jordan Love is a pretty solid draft, but Love behind Fitzpatrick for a year. Draft again, and we're talking a Super Bowl. If you like Love that much, yeah. People are like, oh, he's Patrick. He's not Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes' production, granted, different schools, different defenses he was playing against. And I know Jordan Love had the 33 touchdown year before his 17 and 10 year. Maybe it was 20 and 17 year. I think it was actually 20 and 17. He had better production, but he's not Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes went in that draft. Deshaun Watson and Mahomes were my favorite quarterbacks coming out of that draft, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but it's pretty clear. Like, yeah, these two guys are pretty good. One of them passed for almost 600 yards in a game. The other one drove his team down against Alabama to win a national championship and carried that team to a victory, and just played so well in that game. Like, so and Jordan Love just doesn't have any of those games. He's more of a project. I get it. He's got a lot of talent. Can throw the ball a mile. He's got good athleticism. I think other than Tua, he definitely is one of the best quarterbacks in this draft in terms of off-platform throws. Like, people talk about, oh, can you bend your arm like a pitcher or something like that, a little sidearm throw. Can you throw off different platforms? I think Tua and Love do that the most out of any of the other guys. So if you want to hear a compliment about Love, I guess that's the compliment. But yeah, Tua T is a running back of Jordan Love. I would rather have Herbert or Tua or Burrow, but it would be a pretty dang good draft with the other guys. This next question comes with Listen Without Warning. He says, how long will Fitzpatrick be with us after we get a new quarterback? He will start the entire year, barring some crazy... Like, he would have to play really bad. But I would expect him to start the entire year. He played really well last year, gave us really good football, and I would expect him to continue that. Plus, Chan Gailey's coming in. He had his best season as a player with Chan Gailey, or his second best. My opinion, his best season was last year, in my opinion. I mean, he carried an offense to a lot of touchdowns. Let's put it that way. I mean, you think we had 4 rushing touchdowns last year, led the team in rushing. I mean, he was a one-man show a lot of the time last year, just because he couldn't get his receivers open because he just didn't have enough time. He had to make a lot of things happen with his feet. So I think the combination of Gailey coming in and his play last year, I think, should be good things for the Dolphins. This next question comes from Beef. He says, with all these better roster moves we've made, is it most likely because Chris Greer is making these decisions now that Mike Tannenbaum is no longer in the picture? Yeah, I do. I think Mike Tannenbaum was an enabler. I don't think he really put his foot down ever. He didn't have a strong stance on a lot of things. Adam Gase pretty much ran the organization at the time. By all accounts, his hires in terms of front office and his, when you talk about some of the things that he did for the organization were awful. Some of the things he said publicly were terrible. Like he said, when Lamar Miller and Olivier Vernon left in free agency, he literally said, you know what? It's like they graduated. It's like, dude, I want to slap you in the face for saying something stupid like that. It's like they graduated. You do realize we're in the NFL, right? That was one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. It's like we were producing talent for other teams. Like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, Mike Tannenbaum was a mess. He was a mess. Like, he was not good at his job. So, yeah. I think we're way better off without Mike. No offense to Mike, but, it was pretty bad here in Miami for a while. And a lot of it had to do with him. Okay. This next question comes from Beef. He says, what is your most disappointing and most proud moment as a Dolphins fan that you lived to have experienced? Most disappointing? Oh my god, dude. There have been a lot over the years, these last 8 years especially. Let's keep this in the 8-year parameter. I think the most disappointing... There have been a lot of... I mean, especially in the draft, like, there's been a lot of moments where I'm like, well, wish I had the other guy. But, recently it hasn't been that bad. I mean, Minka... Wilkins was a little bit of a surprise, but he's still a good player. Chris Harris was like, God, dude, really? Even though at the time I was trying to, like, you know what, this might... But, I mean, hey, there's just better pass rushers there. Better picks at that position. So to say what's the most disappointing, I don't know. I would say the most disappointing in recent years was, because there's a lot of them over time, but I would say the most disappointing, I think the most disgusted I've been is having to watch Jay Cutler and Brock Osweiler. I mean, I don't ever want to go through that again. Couple that with a really bad offensive line, I never want to watch that ever again. I would say the most disappointing, I would say, is probably in 2013 when they missed the playoffs, because we beat the Steelers in Pittsburgh. We beat the Patriots in a crazy game when Ryan led the team on a game-winning drive, and then Mike Thomas, who we just got off the 49ers practice squad at the time, picks off Brady for the win. We were coming off those wins, and all we had to do was beat the Jets and the Bills, and we were in. And they were way lesser teams than those two. For sure. They were nowhere near as good as those two other teams that we beat. We ended up losing to the Bills in an ugly one, and then we lost to the Jets in another ugly one. And I think that was probably the most disappointing season. This was probably the most gross end to a season. Like, man, we were coming off such a high, and then we just fall apart at the end. So, yeah. In my most proud moment, I wouldn't call... The Miracle in Miami was awesome. And it was awesome. But, there was still so much going on that season that it was just kind of like a ray of sunshine in an otherwise cloudy day in Miami Dolphins fandom. So I'm going to say the most proud, I would probably say in recent years. I'm going to keep all of this in recent years. Because, dude, we could sit here for an hour. I could bring up 10 other things, and I'm equally as mad about these 10 things. I would say proud in recent years. Man, there has not been a lot to be proud of. Proud is an interesting word to use. I would say proud. I was proud. Okay, yeah. By far the most proud I've been is our 6-game winning streak. And we made the playoffs, and we blew out the Jets, and we beat Rex Ryan's Bills in Buffalo. I would say that 2016's playoff run has been the most proud of a team I've been in a long time. Because we made the playoffs, we went on that 6-game winning streak. Tannehill was giving all of his haters the middle finger. He was playing his best ball. We had a rookie head coach. We had a good nucleus on offense. We had Jay Ajayi, who was killing it. Jarvis Landry, who was killing it. DP was still giving us good yardage, good production to be the second best receiver on the team. We had a really good offensive line. We had the Unicorns when they were healthy. It was awesome. The defense was a opportunistic, but not a good defense, but an opportunistic defense. It was fun to watch because it got a lot of turnovers. I would say the only bad part of 2016 was Byron Maxwell. Having to watch Byron Maxwell every week and play 50,000 miles away from his receiver was very frustrating. But other than that, it was probably the most proud I've been of a team in recent memory. This next question comes with listen without warning. He says, do we sign any free agents after the draft? Yes. I think you're going to see some defensive backs for sure. This next question comes from SM. He says, what is Charles Harris's deal? He was a bust. This next question comes from SM. He says, have you watched any film on FIU quarterback James Morgan? A little bit. Not really that impressed. He's just not... No. We need to take a quarterback. If you want to take a second one, take a Hurts. Maybe if you're still in the market, if you're close, Love. But if you're going to take a second quarterback, I would go with one of those two. This next question comes from SM. He says, if we don't take a quarterback at 5, would you rather have your pick of offensive tackle or Isaiah Simmons? Isaiah Simmons. I'm a really big Isaiah Simmons fan. This next question comes from Beef. He says, what do you think is the possibility that either the New York Giants or Detroit Lions might attempt to get a quarterback before Miami? 0. This next question comes from SM. He says, I don't know if you heard of Walter Football. On his page, Joe Burrow compares to Andy Dalton, and Tua compares to Russell Wilson. Andy Dalton and Joe Burrow are completely different. Andy Dalton is not the pocket passer Joe Burrow is. He can't put the ball, like Joe Burrow puts the ball in crazy, like he isn't deadly accurate though. Andy Dalton was never that. He was never as consistent as Joe Burrow. Tua, the difference between Tua and Russell's a way better athlete than Tua. He's way better at throwing off platform, and he's a better improviser than Tua. Their games are completely different. Tua's more of an athlete who's a really good pocket passer, but he's not he's not Michael Vick, he's not Russell Wilson. Like Russell Wilson was a special athlete, and like I said, he can't throw off platform like Tua or that like Russell can. Tua's more of a pocket passer who can make plays happen, but that's the best thing the best thing that he does is being a pocket passer. So yeah, I think those players are very different. This next question comes from Beef. He says, if the Bengals decide to get Herbert, do you think Miami should try to get Burrow instead of Tua? If Burrow falls, yes. And the only reason I say that is you don't have to worry about any of the injuries. Joe's he's going to be in the building whenever he's able to, obviously because of the times we live in, but there's no risk there. And he's just as good of a prospect as Tua. So yeah, you have to go with Burrow. 0 risk. He's going to be a great quarterback, even though I think Tua's going to be a great quarterback, but you don't have the question marks with the injuries like you do with Tua. This next question comes with Listen Without Warning. He says, what do we do with Josh Rosen? You keep him on the roster. You keep trying to develop him, see where he can go with it. Is there improvement from year 1 to year 2 and with the Dolphins? And if there is, you just kind of got to keep at it. He's a talented guy. I really like him. I want to take back something I said in, I think it was last week's episode. Who would you rather have, Herbert or Rosen? I got to go with Herbert. After watching a lot of Herbert since last week's episode, Herbert, I think, was undoubtedly a better prospect than Rosen was coming out of college. That's just my opinion. I think Herbert fits today's game way more. I think he's physically more gifted, and he turned the ball over way less at Oregon. He made better decisions with the football, and I think he's way more consistent than Josh Rosen was coming out of college. So I'm going with Herbert over Rosen in terms of a prospect. But Rosen, he's still very talented. He still could be a really good pocket passer in this league. Can he put it together? We'll have to see. This next question comes from SM. He says, Rosen or Herbert starting for Miami in 2021? If they're both on the roster, Herbert would probably beat Rosen out. I feel like people don't watch Herbert. Like, even I watched Herbert, but it had been months since I've seen him play. But I did watch a lot of Herbert. But watching him play again and watching a lot of his games, it's like, yeah, this guy's actually pretty good. And there's nothing really like his faults. Like and it's amazing. Herbert is like the best kept secret in a weird way. It's like, hey, what are Herbert's faults? He doesn't hold the ball long enough. That's my faults with him. He needs to make more plays with his legs. And it's like if you say that about any other quarterback, well, he holds the ball too long. Like people don't know if quarterbacks are going to be good. And it's, to be honest with you, with Herbert, it's literal nitpicking. It's like, what do you not like about Herbert? Well, you actually kind of have to like. There's not a lot. I mean, everything. It's really just there's a lot to like. There's not a lot to not like, and I think he really is an underrated prospect, and it's just really weird, Herbert's deal. I think Herbert, and really a lot of the drafts in recent years, would be a top 5 prospect. When you compare him, like even last year, I mean, you look at Murray and Herbert. Murray I think maybe a better prospect because of his combination of athleticism and his ability to throw the football, and his arm. But Herbert's right there, like, in terms of, like, oh, he's the second guy off the board. And he would have won the top 5 last year, but for sure would have won the top 5 last year. He's one of the better prospects that I've watched in recent years. And it's weird that he's not getting more love. And again, Tua and Joe are really good too. This is a very underrated quarterback class. It really is. It's super top heavy, but I like the 3 that are in it better than a lot of like. If you're like, oh, give me a 3 from other drafts, like this 3, I think I would take over the other 3. I guess Josh Allen, Josh Rosen, and Baker Mayfield would be the other 3. I guess you got to throw Lamar in there. But in terms of watching them, this one ranks high on my list. I think if I had to rank them, I don't want to rank them right now, but it would rank high on my year in terms of quarterback class years. It would rank very high in recent years for sure. So that is it, ladies and gentlemen. That is it for this week's episode. You guys already know how hype it's gonna. I mean, it's gonna be hype. This is like the Super Bowl, ladies and gentlemen. Fasten your seatbelts, because here we go. It is gonna be crazy, dude. Even after the Bengals, let's say they pick Burrow, I'm still gonna be holding my breath, because it's like, are they gonna trade him to the Dolphins? Because people forget that's how Eli ended up in New York. So nothing is safe. There's not gonna be a moment wasted in the draft. It's gonna be crazy, dude. This is the most hyped I've been for a Dolphins sporting event in a long time. So it's gonna be pretty awesome. So I'm Skax3, fins up. Super hyped, and I will see you guys in the next one.